Good morning and welcome to worship at Gay Street United Methodist Church. Welcome wherever you are, wherever you're sitting or standing, or what view you have out your window. Whichever day this is that you're joining us, you are so welcome to be part of this worship service today. I just have a couple of announcements that I'd like to make, especially because we only have so many forms of communication here. We have been trying out a Sunday morning schedule that included some small worship services that you signed up for to keep them small. But we are going to be shifting that, and including shifting the time of our live recording in a couple of weeks, so that we will have instead 2 sanctuary services, because the sanctuary allows us to spread out and socially distance, and we'll be doing that for a while yet, at 8:30 and 10:30. We'll do this live recording at 9:30. So if you've been watching it live, we would encourage you to switch your schedule for that. So that will start on July 26th. And I hope you will still continue to join us in whatever way is possible and let us know, how you are doing. That's the other piece here. Without having some of the time connected to each other in the congregation, if you've got a prayer concern or some questions, please contact the church office. We're back to more or less normal church office hours from 8 to 3:30, although not on Fridays in the summertime. Give the church office a call, send in an email, sign up if you have not done it before for our e-devotionals that come out on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They're not just a devotion, that is part of it. It's a devotion, it's prayer concerns of the church, it is announcements, and especially as we're going through changes, if we ever had to suddenly shut down again, that would be the kind of one of those places where we'd want to share that information. So there's messages in our scriptures today about information and what we do with it. This is some of our information that helps keep us connected. We continue this week to be welcoming Mike Snyder to our music team and music leadership here at Gay Street United Methodist Church. This is just his second Sunday, so maybe this is the first Sunday you get to hear him. Here in the room with us today, we're joined also by Angie Snyder, his wife, Tony and Susie Springer, who are going to be doing our act of praise, Patrick Fraser and Jada Breeding, who are our sound technicians, and Reverend Lauren Miller will be joining us as part of doing liturgy as well this morning. Welcome. I invite you to make yourself comfortable, to breathe, to center yourself now as we go into a time of worship.
Good morning. As Pastor Karen said, that in our ED votes and also in the monthly Tower Topics, we have our prayer concerns, and so I invite you to take a look at those and maybe even print them out and put them somewhere where your devotions are or on your breakfast table, wherever you may see them and lift them up in prayer during the day. Let us go to God in prayer now. Ever patient and faithful Lord, your word tells us of the struggle long ago of Abraham and Sarah to have a child, of Jacob and Rebekah's story of the same, and of the tussle between Esau and Jacob even before they were born. We know life can be a struggle, a contest, a race, a commitment. Seeds push their way through the soil, roots cling to rocks, to cracks in the rocks. Trees compete for air and light. All animals fight their way to birth and to be camouflaged from enemies. And so it is with our hearts and minds. You have given us gifts of grace that we are drawn to you through our worst times. Your word can break through the most ingrained of understandings as we cling to long-held wrongs and hurtful words, actions, and traditions that do not grow into the beloved community. You have envisioned this community for us. And even if it never gets easier to follow your path to green grass, the safe enclosure, and the calm sea, we praise your name in the hard, stressful, and uncertain times as you make the way. Your Son leads us as the shepherd who will not desert us in the darkest of moments. Your name is not forgotten in the bright and easy times when we feel like our life is a parade. We pray your everlasting love be the sun that enlightens our souls. And we join our voices together, praying Jesus' prayer he taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Our scriptures for today come from Genesis chapter 25 and Matthew chapter 13. So this is Genesis 25, beginning at verse 19. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham became the father of Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean, and the sister of Laban, the Aramean, from Paddan Aram. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife, since she was unable to have children. And his wife Rebekah became pregnant. But the boys pushed against each other inside of her, and she said, "If this is what it's like, why did it happen to me?" So she went to ask the Lord. And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb. Two different peoples will emerge from your body. One people will be stronger than the other. The older will serve the younger." When she reached the end of her pregnancy, she discovered that she had twins. The first came out red all over, clothed in hair, and she named him Esau. Immediately afterward, his brother came out gripping Esau's heel, and she named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. When the young men grew up, Esau became an outdoorsman who knew how to hunt, and Jacob became a quiet man who stayed at home. Isaac loved Esau because he enjoyed eating game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once, when Jacob was boiling stew, Esau came in from the field and said to Jacob, "I'm starving. Let me devour some of this red stuff." That's why his name is Edom. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright today." Esau said, "Since I'm going to die anyway, what good is any birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Give me your word today." And he did. He sold his birthright to Jacob. So Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew. He ate, drank, got up, and left, showing just how little he thought of his birthright. And our second reading is from the book of Matthew. That day Jesus went out of the house and sat down beside the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he climbed into a boat and sat down. The whole crowd was standing on the shore. He said many things to them in parables. A farmer went out to scatter seed. As he was scattering seed, some fell on the path, and birds came and ate it. Other seed fell on rocky ground where the soil was shallow. They sprouted immediately because the soil wasn't deep. But when the sun came up, it scorched the plants, and they dried up because they had no roots. Other seed fell among thorny plants. The thorny plants grew and choked them. Other seed fell on good soil and bore fruit. In one case, a yield of 100 to 1, in another case, a yield of 60 to 1, and in another case, a yield of 30 to 1. Everyone who has ears should pay attention. Later on, the disciples come to Jesus and they ask him to explain. And so it goes on in the scripture to say, "Consider then the parables of the farmer. Whenever people hear the word about the kingdom and don't understand it, the evil one comes and carries off what was planted in their hearts. This is the seed that was sown on the path. As for the seed that was spread on rocky ground, this refers to people who hear the word and immediately receive it joyfully. Because they have no roots, they last for only a little while. When they experience distress or abuse because of the word, they immediately fall away. As for the seed that was spread among thorny plants, this refers to those who hear the word, but the worries of this life and the false appeal of wealth choke the word, and it bears no fruit. As for what was planted on good soil, this refers to those who hear and understand and bear fruit and produce. In one case, a yield of 100 to 1, In another case, a yield of 60 to 1, and in another case, a yield of 30 to 1. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
You know, not every character or person described in the Bible is meant to be a good example. We're not meant to look at everybody and say, look at this and do like they do. Now there's heroes, there's heroines, there's people who are strong and faithful and inspire us to be strong and faithful as well. But usually in their stories you also notice that they are human. Things go wrong, they mess up. Even those who are the ones that we look up to. And by the time you read a lot of these stories, you don't necessarily come up with, there's a lot of models to follow. What you finally come up with is, wow, what manner of love God has for us. That we should be called children of God. And that God will find ways to work good out of all kinds of the ways that we mess things up. Now I will tell you, I think there are definitely some stories that we are supposed to look at and say, don't do this, as we see what happens to folks. But most of the rest of the stories about people are just about people and how God is working in their life. And it's okay as we hear them not to think that everything they do is right or wrong, and sometimes maybe to question, could something have been done differently? Is there something I can learn from this that will help me if I'm in some kind of a situation? We're in the middle of the stories about the patriarchs and matriarchs of our faith that are told in the book of Genesis. And last week we began the story of Isaac and Rebekah. We had the search for Isaac's wife, Rebekah, and she's found, and we had the happy ending. Isaac and Rebekah got married, and Isaac loved Rebekah, and she comforted him for the loss of his mother. That's good. That was a wonderful to receive that story. But now we're kind of come to the next stage here. 20 years have gone by. And Isaac was 40 when he got married, so he's getting up there. 20 years have gone by and no children. No children. So Isaac prays to the Lord for his wife, Rebekah. I like how that's phrased. He prays to the Lord for his wife, Rebekah. And she does indeed get pregnant. But she's apparently having a terrible time because she says, why did this have to happen to me? I mean, she is actually herself a little older to be pregnant as well at this point. But something is happening. What we're told in the Bible that she doesn't know is that the two boys are pushing against each other in her womb. Can you imagine? There's basically a wrestling match going on inside of her, and twins, and she's never had a baby before, and she probably feels like she's being torn apart, kicked and punched from the inside. She'd really rather not be pregnant at all, and is terrified on top of all of this. So she does the appropriate thing also at this point. She goes to God to find out what is going on. And interestingly enough, what God offers is not a solution, it's information. It's not a solution, it's information. It's not really a prophecy, it's information that God gives to her at this point. 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples will emerge from your body. I mean, at this point, Rebekah hadn't even known she was having twins, much less 2 nations and 2 peoples. Well, no wonder she feels this way. 2 peoples, and just to wrap her head around that. But you get a hint right away that all is not well. Besides the fact that these infants are struggling already with each other, she's given a couple of other hints of information. One will be stronger than the other. So there will be an unequal balance between them in the world. And the older will have to serve the younger, which is flipping around the norms for the cultures and the peoples at that time. So something is going to happen here. And indeed, even when these twins are born, Jacob, Esau is born first, and Jacob comes out he's already grabbing Esau's heel. So they're set up already to know that this is a struggle. And this is a struggle not just in the moment, but for generations yet to come. What should Rebekah do? Just try to survive? Try to align herself with the winning side? Is there anything else she can do? Now, I'm not trying to be hard on Rebekah, because here's how I understand this. We are all Rebekah. Every single one of us. Inside of each person, there are those differences and forces that will fight against each other even inside us. In each person, in each family, in each community, in each nation, around the world, and yes, even in the church, there will be forces fighting against one another. There will be injustices and inequalities and ways that we're trying to figure out how to live together at all times as human beings. And we always have the choice. Is there some way that this can be done? Now, the rest of the story, this little snapshot that you get of the life of Isaac and Rebekah and their two sons is troubling, because it doesn't appear that anything is being done to maybe mitigate the struggles that are going on. Instead, what you have is Isaac loved Esau the best, because Esau was the outdoorsman and he went hunting, and Isaac loved to eat game. And Rebekah clearly loved Jacob the best, because he was the quiet one who stayed close to home and was more attached to his mother. So right now you have divided this family very specifically. And then you have the whole game that Jacob plays with Esau and his birthright going on, which is just a preview of other things that will happen later. And I know a lot of times we just receive this story as information. Oh, well, that's information, and it helps to understand why later on Israel, descendants of Jacob, and Edom, descendants of Esau, these two neighboring countries, will struggle against each other in the future. Sometimes they'll be allies and sometimes they will be enemies. So sometimes we look at this story and just say, well, that just explains why this happened. But did it have to happen that way? Was there anything that could have been done to bring about peace, to bring about a sense of the family working together instead? I don't know. But we need to ask that question all the time. Many of you know that the United Methodist Church itself is struggling within itself, because in the 50 years that it's been around, not a very long life that it's been around, this church has exploded. It's a global church all around the world, representing millions of people of all different cultures and nationalities and traditions and understandings and spiritual practices and languages and administrative skills that they have and how they organize themselves. All of this, the United Methodist Church spans this. Of course there's going to be struggles in there. And certain things have brought us to a point of saying, can we still exist as one church in the world? And this has been going on for a while now. And what we learned last year in 2019, when a special general conference was called, General Conference is our legislative body. This is how we're organized as United Methodists. We're conferencing. This is how we do our administration and make our decisions. We conference together. So our General Conference is our worldwide legislative body. It only meets every 4 years, but a special session was called last year. And you know what we learned? You cannot legislate unity. You can't pass rules and say everybody has to think the same way. So we are still struggling. And immediately new proposals and plans came out, many of which describe ways that we might reorganize as more than one denomination instead of being one church as United Methodists anymore. And a lot of that legislation was supposed to come before General Conference in May this year. It is now postponed till the end of the summer in 2021, but I am grateful for that, because I feel like this gives us a chance to say, is this indeed what we need to do? And to think about it and say, is there another way that we can consider? Or is it just right to separate? Some of the bodies within the United Methodist Church that are very intentional about seeing a new denomination and that being part of a new denomination, splitting from the United Methodist Church, and are already planning, they bring out a couple of examples from the Bible sometimes to say, see, this does happen. Remember Abraham and Lot. You know, Abraham and Lot separated and went different directions and chose different kinds of lands because their herdsmen and people that were working for them were arguing over resources. And Paul and Barnabas, we know, had been a wonderful team, but at one point they have an argument and they go their separate ways and go into ministry separately. And so I hear it said, well, it's in the Bible. Not everything in the Bible is an example of do this, remember. I look at Abraham and Lot, and they separated, and Lot immediately got into trouble, and Abraham had to go rescue him and get him out of a pickle, and has to stand up for him later. In fact, things go very badly for Lot and his family. And Paul and Barnabas, they split at a time that was critical in the baby Christian church, when they had just been this major decision that you didn't have to become all the way Jewish to become a Christian. It means you didn't have to be circumcised and follow all the food and festival and very specific laws to be a follower of Jesus, along with those that had believed in Jesus out of their Jewish faith. That was a big deal. And Paul and Barnabas were supposed to be part of the group that went out and told everybody this good news, and yet they have a fight and separate. I always am left saying, what if they had not? What if a different way had been found? Is it right for us just to say, well, it's okay because God will bring something good out of it anyways. He did in the Bible, he can do it again. Is that the way Jesus operated? Said, well, things will break and fall apart and that's okay because something good will come out of it? Of course not. Jesus preached forgiveness and reconciliation and not looking at people and judging them according to their status, their wealth, their race, their gender, even their cleanliness, which was a big deal at the time. Jesus did not do all that kind of separating ever in his ministry. And in fact, when there was conflict, and he experienced a lot of conflict, he was truthful. He said, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be persecutions. Jesus himself was involved in lots of conflict, especially with the religious leaders. But Jesus, when people were lost and heard the message and didn't get it, Jesus lamented over that. He grieved over that. We're not supposed to simply say, this is a bad situation, I hope I survive it, or that I land on the winning side. We're not sure if that was why Rebecca, favored Jacob or not, but it doesn't matter. We have our own decisions to make. And when we receive information, we're supposed to do something with that and think, is there a way I can use this? So let's look at the parable of the sower, because this is one of our favorite parables. It's so lovely because Jesus tells a little story about the sower, and then he explains it later. It's clearly an allegory. And we go, that is great. But the trouble is we usually stop there and say, that's really cool how Jesus made that comparison. We don't necessarily see how we're involved with this, and that this is actually a call to action for us as well. We like this story. A sower goes out to scatter the seed. Well, that's God. Good job, God. God's out there teaching and spreading the word and moving within us with prevenient grace and all those good things. That's wonderful. And we love the description of the 4 kinds of soil as we go along. The path that's all trodden down from ages of tradition, and this is the way we do it, and things like that. We understand there's a beaten path there, and the seed does not do too well on that. And the rocky soil, we get that too. The rocky soil, that there are lots of people, we understand that hear the word, they have a quick conversion, or they have a wonderful high mountaintop experience, and for a while are kind of come into church and faithful for a while, and then, but if something happens, disease or death or disaster or something, that they're challenged, or other people say to them, why are you doing that? They'll fall away because they don't have roots. We get that. And we totally get the thorn thing, that's the anxieties and the attraction of things that money can buy. We are always bombarded with that issue and the competition that we have as people of faith. So we get to the good soil, and I always hear this in kind of the cowardly lion's voice. I do believe in good soil. I do believe in good soil. I hope I'm the good soil. I hope I'm the good soil. Just kind of hoping that. But what if we look at this story instead and say, wait a minute, maybe there's stuff we can do. Maybe it's not just God who's supposed to be scattering the seed. Maybe we're supposed to help out scattering the seed. Well, indeed we are. If you look at the way Jesus commissions and sends out his disciples on a mission, of course we're supposed to help scattering the seed. And we are the seed as well. That we have to remember we're the seed. At the very end of this, the whole point is to be fruitful. That's our purpose, to multiply and be fruitful. That's written into our creation and our DNA. And then finally, the soils, we can do something with it. Anybody who's a gardener out there, you don't just go, oh, well, I guess I've got bad soil, I can't do anything about it. No, there's stuff you do. There's stuff we can do as a church. So if we're locked into that beaten path of everything we've always done, we need to learn to wiggle. We need to learn to dig a little bit. We need to learn to loosen up the dirt and expect some new things so there's space for new seeds to come in and take root. And where there's rocky ground, where people need to develop roots, well, what would you do in your garden? You take the rocks out. You find ways for people to dig deep into their faith. For all of us, this is discipleship. We should be doing this all our lives long because there will be challenges. And we need the roots to keep going and growing and spreading deep. So get the rocks out of the way, whatever those barriers are in our life as a church. And the thorns, here's where we hold each other accountable, because we're all going to face distractions and attractions into other places. So we watch out for one another in love. And we spend time with one another. And we say we haven't seen you for a while. And we ask how people are. And finally, we do whatever we can to create that good soil just in general, so that people can hear and receive the word and use it. It's an activity, this fruit farming. It's not a story. We're part of being God's fruit farmers in the world so we can be fruitful. You know, the way that Jesus says this, and he tells the story the first time, he goes, if anybody's got ears to hear, pay attention. But I think it's not just pay attention, but be active in it. Take part in it. Where are we working together with God for good in the world? Because there is much to be done and much fruit that people need. Amen. Thanks be to God. You know, I am thankful for the seed and all the different ways we receive the seed here at the church and get to do this ministry of fruit farming for God. I'm also thankful for one particular body in the church that not only receives information about our resources, but tries to take action, but takes action with it. And that's the finance committee. You know, they meet regularly and they receive reports of where our finances are and keep track of things like that. But they are also there to make decisions about where we can use resources and where we can't, to communicate that to other bodies. They're there to encourage generosity, and they're trying some new things, and they're learning some new ways, and they're paying attention to some things now, so that there can be more action and not just saying, oh, well, you know, we may not have the money, but instead being really good, helping us to be good stewards of our resources. So I am thankful for them. I'm thankful for all the giving and the sharing that goes on in this church, and the ways that is used sometimes to go back into the soil and make it even richer. And the rich soil that we already have from all the saints of this church that are preparing us and nurturing us, all of these things make me thankful to be part of the Gay Street United Methodist Church. Just as we respond to the word with action, we respond to our life in church by the way we give of ourselves, our tithes, our gifts, our offerings, our service. Take a moment right now. Think how you will respond either to the word that you've heard today or to some call that God has upon your life. Set aside any distractions that may be getting in the way, and think how you might get your hands right down into the dirt and be actively engaged in spreading the word of God. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Amen. I invite you to go out this week and enjoy the earth, see where things are blooming and fruitful, and remember this parable, and pay attention to where we can be working together. God bless.